Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Good evening, everyone, and good morning, everyone. Welcome back to the third Dhamma talk, which comes under the mental health awareness series. In today's talk, we will be discussing about eating habits, craveables, and modern self-modification. So this is kind of a new topic, but I think there are elements which have been discussed and which have been paid more attention by scholars and non-scholars. Our plan is to discuss the Buddhist perspective on how to keep healthy eating habits and how to uh, reduce amount of craveables. At the same time, to check in with our perspectives about food with self-modification. Actually, use the term called modern self-modification. Self-modification means Atta Kilamatana Yoga in Pali. In Atta Kilamatana Yoga, what we understand is it is something where people try to burn up their, old karmas, probably by, giving some pain, going into some of the course practices like not eating regularly or fasting, probably creating new thoughts about different, especially the new thoughts about reducing and then, I would say going away from sensual pleasures. And pretty much it is about extreme kind of perspective about the body. So, in the first Dhamma talk, which the Buddha gave to 5 ascetics, now they were ascetics actually. They were good exam. They were a good example for people who've been practicing Atta Kilamatana Yoga. To which concept they thought that this is the only way. I mean, self-modification is the only way to liberate oneself, both secular-wise and extra, I would say, transcendental-wise. So, in the first talk, which we call by Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, Buddha explained to us this way. Yo chayang atta kilamatana yogo dukkho anariyo anatta sanghito. Pursuit of self-modification, which is painful, ignoble, and unbeneficial. So, the way how I'm going to connect this to our topic is, so we have eating habits, be that healthy or unhealthy, and then we have craveables for healthy or unhealthy, I would say, habits, right? Eating habits. So they could be craveables, things that you eat because of craving. And then looking at self-modification in a way which I already, coined kind of a new concept called modern self-modification. So we're going to look at self-modification in the contemporary context. Now, generally speaking, self-modification is generally considered to be an olden practice, like by Jains and other ascetics. But we're going to look at whether people in the modern society, contemporary society, also practice self-modification in a different way or different ways, different contexts. So this is our main plan today. So I think finally what we can learn from this Dhamma talk is to look at or probably revise our healthy eating habits, and then about the craveables. Using food as an object for the hunger and thirst rather than keeping them as being craveables, and then looking at other uh, ways where we directly or indirectly practice self-modification. Now, one clear example is, because we know that we are supposed to overcome our craving. Some people have a very negative negative perception about the food. So what can happen at times is that they discuss food. Now, the common idea is we need to eat in moderation. Now, Buddhism does not worry about what kind of food you eat. I mean, there are food that you can't eat, especially if you are a monk, nun, as per the Vinaya. But Buddhism does not worry about what food they eat, but they worry. But the Buddhism is really concerned about the thoughts you have about the food, your emotional patterns, your emotional structure about the food. That is what the Buddhism is very interested in, because Buddhism can say that this is the food you have to eat. This is a Buddhist food. This is un-Buddhist. Buddhism can do that, because Buddhism is a cosmic philosophy, cosmic teaching. So Buddhism does not limit, the freedom of eating, right? So, anyways, now what I was trying to say is that so people, when they practice Buddhism, they sometimes they go over some of the fundamental practices. Now, Attakilamatana Yoga is a place where people misuse the Sila part, ethics part. When they don't practice Sila part in balance, then what happens? It can be a Silapada, kind of a cult, right? Sila is there to go get into the next stage, Samadhi, and then to the next stage, Panya. But if you are too much into your whatever, small ethical parts, I mean, we have to really concern about every ethical thing. But if you are too extreme about even ethics, that is not a good thing. That will take us to another contemporary type of, I would say, modern type of self-modification. I mean, I will be looking at the overindulgence part, the contemporary context of the overindulgence part in another talk. But today, I'm looking at eating habits, cravings, and self-modification in the context of contemporary society. Okay, so how important is the teaching of food in Buddhism? Now, one of the Dhammapada stanzas, Buddha says, knowing how much is enough when eating, this is the teaching of the Buddha. Now, there are a couple Pali words. Now, if you look at, read Dhammapada, you can see there are a bunch of words. Now, one of the words that Buddha used was mattanyuta. Mattanyuta means knowing the moderation of food. If you don't know the moderation of your, probably knowing the amount of food that you are supposed to eat, right? Now, if you are very sick, you may have to eat a lot, probably eat some food in excess. But if you are a healthy person, then you are supposed to eat food in moderation. Now, this is something Buddha really was concerned. But if you look at the contemporary world, be that the Eastern world and the Western world, a lot of people are overweight in many parts of the world. The reason is that people are emotionally driven by the food. I mean, we have a very long discussion, very interesting discussion about healthy food, right? But not many people talk about the amount of food. If you watch a TV program, you can see that there are many programs where people talk about good food. I would say superfood, healthy food, but nobody talks about the importance of eating in moderation. Now, this is the Buddhist attitude towards the food, right? I mean, of course, you need to know what food are good. At the same time, what are the different food that you need to eat for your different illnesses, diseases, probably to keep you healthy. But most importantly, the Buddhism deals with the emotional part of, I would say, the mental structure about the attitude of the food, the attitude that you need to cultivate towards the food. That is more important than sometimes the perhaps the type of food you eat, because you have culturally driven food, you have socially driven food. So over time, what has been happening is that we exist in a love-hate relationship with our bodies, and in a kind of a state of conflict over food. Now, for example, if you eat a five-course dinner at the Four Seasons Hotel, I would say kind of a very expensive dinner, or kind of a very minimalist type of dinner, or any other meals, uh, you know, the most important, probably the most attentive part that you have is not about the emotional structure about the food, but about the simple gratification of your desire. So you have a simple gratification. This is the food that I like. This is your main emphasis, right? So especially when you eat such expensive food, I mean, I have no objection over that, but you simply sometimes don't care even the nourishment of the food. You don't talk about the amount of food. So you thoroughly disregard the nourishment part as well. Then what about the gratification? So the main thing is the gratification. So this is kind of a very tricky kind of a mentality that people have. People always go for food simply because of the gratification of your desire or their desire. So they mostly ignore about the nourishment. But there are people who are interested about, concerned about the nourishment. But it is not always going the way as they expected. So Buddhism is more concerned, more interested about the amount of food you eat. So that is why Buddha clearly mentions Mattanyuta is one of the very uh, elementary type of fundamental type of quality that a good person, I would say, a Buddhist, I would say, even you are not a Buddhist, I would say somebody who wants to follow the Buddhist teachings has to maintain over time. Now, when we talk about eating habits, now this is one of the sections of our topic today. What are the areas that we have to look at? Eating habit. When you talk about eating habits, so I can give you a couple ways to look at your eating habits. The first one is how you eat. Now, this is very interesting. Now, how you eat mean, do you eat slowly, or were you distracted, or do you eat with others? So these are three angles of how you eat. So do you eat? Are you a slow eater or fast eater, or are you distracted before you eating or while you're eating? And do you eat with others? So these three aspects uh, comprise of how you eat. Now it clearly connects to your emotional structure. If you are a slow eater or a fast eater, that can sort of decide about your emotional structure. Probably you will have to go somewhere soon. That's why you want to finish up. Probably you have a lot of time, right? So this is one of the aspects of how you eat. And do you eat because you are distracted, right? So if you are distracted, that means you have emotional eating habit, right? Then that's a big problem too, right? Because if you eat just because you are distracted, you never care about what you eat, right? How you eat as well. That might be taking you to unwholesome aspect. And do you eat with others? Now, this is very interesting. Now, we know we need to socialize at times, right? But sometimes when you eat with others, you never care about what you eat. Probably you have this herd mentality, so that you may perhaps eat unhealthy stuff. At the same time, you might be emotionally driven with other people, right? So there are pros and cons, right? So how you eat depends on whether you eat slowly or fast, or whether you are distracted or not, or you eat with others or alone. And then why you eat? Now it's a question. Now the answer to the question why you eat is not always whether we are hungry or not. People eat not because they are hungry for the most time, for the most part of their eating activities, right? Probably they are emotionally driven. Probably they are hungry. Probably it was offered by somebody else, right? These are another three aspects of being, you know, very important, because if you check in with yourself, why I eat or why I ate, uh, that is something to look at under a healthy, I would say, eating habit. And then what you eat or what you ate. This is about the different types of foods. And when you eat or when you ate, right? And it depends, right? Because health wise, the time you eat matters. Because if you eat uh, at wrong times, I would say if you eat and sleep right away, or if you eat and probably proceed to another heavy activity, I mean, health wise, I would say, speaking from the healthy angle, health sciences, it may have some consequences. So you have to be concerned about that side too. So when the time affects for a healthy habit, healthy eating habit, and also uh, how much you eat. Now this is really the main concern of Buddhism. How much you eat. Now, regardless of how much food, regardless of what you eat, the problem is the quantity of your food. In Buddhism, this is where Buddha, you know, emphasizes about the quantity of the food. Now, we have many examples. One example is the King Kosala's incident. Now, King Kosala, when one day when King Kosala came to see the Buddha noticed that King Kosala was really wriggling uncomfortably, and then the Buddha knew that he has overeaten. So at that point, the Buddha advises him a very interesting Dhamma teaching. The Dhamma teaching that the Buddha taught him was not to fill up your tummy, and then asking him to leave couple, I would say 4 to 5 morsels. Chattaru pancha alope abutva udakam pive. So leave 4 to 5 morsels, right, in your tummy, because you need to drink water to substitute the rest of the tummy. That means, as Buddhists, or as somebody, or as people who want to follow the Buddhist teachings, we can't fill up the whole tummy. If you fill up the whole tummy for whatever the cultural reason, that means you are not following the Buddha's advice, right? So this is the main concern. So when you eat, you can't fill up the whole tummy. You need to leave some 4 to 5 morsels of whatever the food, so that you are very comfortable, right? So this is about the healthy eating habits. What are the other types of eating habits? Now, I would like to fundamentally look at the amount of food that you are consuming. At the same time, whether you know the limit of your food or beverage, and whether you are emotionally driven or not. So these are the main concerns about the food. Now, there are people who are always emotional for different reasons. Now, what are the reasons where people get very emotional? I would say stress. Now, this is one big reason, right? Now, when people started working from home because of the pandemic, they are in the comfort zone. So the refrigerators are not far away from them, so they can have easy access to refrigerators. So sometimes they don't know the uh, the limit of eating from the refrigerators, because when you are at work, you can't eat that much, right? So this is where people sometimes want to substitute their issues with food, right? So it is mostly the food that people, I would say food or beverages where people depend on to cope up with their emotions. So emotions matter to all of us. This is why this topic has come under the mental health awareness. So what I can tell you on the surface level before we jump into other parts of this discussion, cravings and self-modification, is that do not eat just because you are emotional. Only eat whenever you are hungry. Even when you eat when you are hungry, you need to have a good interval between the meals, right? To make sure that you are not overeating or you are not eating emotionally. So these are two very important parts of unhealthy eating habits. So on one side, it is about overeating. On the other hand, it is about emotional eating. Probably you are overeating because you are emotional, right? You are not taking care of your mental health. Always checking whether you have have a real hunger or thirst before you have access to the food. Simply because there is food, don't try to uh, eat up or grab those kind of snacks. And most of the issues that we have across the world at this point actually help teach us that all these issues come from food. Irregular ways, I would say emotional ways of eating different food, right? If you look at the issues like cholesterol or diabetes or high blood pressure, most of these issues, they come from food. That means we don't have any calmness. We don't have any, I would say, um, you know, proper management of our tongue, taste, right? Because now we know we have eyes, we have ears, we have nose, tongue, body, mind, but when you have a strong, I would say, strong, intense desire for a food, for food or beverages, then you're going to use your mind, ears, eyes, nose, all that to get into that food. So that means rest of the sense faculties are normally and frequently being used to fulfill the intense desire of the taste, right? So this is very interesting to understand. Now, most people think that eyes are problematic, ears are problematic, nose is problem, probably mind is problematic, but mind just executes the coordination. Simply because you can't take care of your tongue, right? We call it jivha pasadi nabidam. Then you are into a lot of issues. Okay. So in the sciences like nutritive sciences, we know that a food craving is an intense desire for a specific food. This seems to be uncontrollable to many, and a person may feel that that person cannot, or I can't, or they can't satisfy their hunger until they get that particular food. So they have also emotionally maintaining that thought. So that is where we have to deconstruct that kind of a thought. So if you think that you can't live without that particular food, then you are having a craveable. Now we are getting into now the second part of this topic. Craveable. What is a craveable? I'm not trying to. I know there is a place where they actually popularize this term, but I don't want to actually mention. We have craveables. They have publicly mentioned craveables, some sweet stuff. But craveable in our context means food and beverages. I mean, in particular, where you have a strong liking, where you have an intense liking. So that is what we call by a craveable. Now try to think about what kind of cravings you have. You can reflect on your own cravings. Is it a chocolate? Is it a kind of a bread? Is it kind of a candy? Is it a kind of a dessert? Right? You know. So XYZ kind of food and beverages which you have a strong liking. So these are what we call by craveables. Dhamma folks, if you have any questions, please type in those questions in the comments below. So now there are two types of cravings. I would say food cravings. I would say two types of craveable aspects. I would say craveables. Now one type is called selective, while the other type is called non-selective. Now, for example, if you have a strong liking for a specific food, like your favorite chocolate bar or candy, or probably a dessert, probably a 5 course meal in a super expensive hotel, probably for a kind of a food that you used to buy from a food truck on the road, and probably other food that junk food you have been used to. Whatever the selective food that you have, we call it the first type of craveable. I would say the selective craveable, right? It might be a bag of potato chips, fish and French fries, and whatever, right? When it comes to the second category, non-selective, it is not a specific desire for a certain food. It is a desire to eat anything. Now, when this is why I'm actually trying to remind you, if you do not manage your meals, say breakfast, lunch, or dinner, supper, then what will happen is that you're gonna overeat, because when you skip one meal, you're gonna overeat. Now I remember one personal incident that happened to me when I was at UBC, while being the Buddhist chaplain at British Columbia in Vancouver. There was a girl who approached me when I was the Buddhist chaplain there. She asked me, I have a question. Now, when I eat, I know I already had my breakfast, but I have to walk through the Student Union building. In my walk through that building, I get to see a lot of food stalls over there. The problem is, even after I had my particular meal, but still I want to buy some food from one of the food stalls. So it's kind of she understands it's a craving. It's a kind of a craveable, but she was asking me, how can I do it? But she told me she tried on one thing. That means she was controlling her desire. That means she didn't eat one of the craveables for some time. And then what happened after the fourth, fifth day, she managed to eat that particular craveable. She could hold it. She could withdraw the desire for 4 to 5 days. And on the sixth day, she ate a lot of chocolates. Right? That means she thought, because I did not eat for the last couple of days, I want to compensate for the number of chocolates that I couldn't eat. So he was asking me how to overcome this issue. Then I said, you need to look at a couple things. The first thing is, you need to tell your mind that you already had a meal, right? So who is asking chocolate? Who is asking more food every day, even after you ate something? It is your untamed mind. If you tame your mind to reflect that I already had my lunch or breakfast or dinner, then it will not take you to another food stall, right? So I also ask her to think about the money, because you can't spend that much money. You are a student. At the same time, try to teach your mind, because normally mind teaches you, mind controls you, but try to teach your mind, right? Don't let the mind control you. Try to tame your mind. Then the mind knows that mind cannot control us. So we're gonna take care of the mind, right? So that is one very good example of taking care of this selective or non-selective type of craveables, I would say food cravings, right? It is a very interesting part of our life. There are a lot of people who fail in actually taking care of their craveables, right? So you need some effort, not fall into these kind of food cravings. Okay. So, what are the reasons where people get into food cravings? So, one reason can be related to a pleasure that you already had with other senses. I would say seeing, smelling, hearing about a specific. Now, this is kind of kind of a trigger where you like to taste that particular food because your eyes are enjoying that particular food, your ears are enjoying that particular food, your nose is enjoying that food. So now you want to use your tongue to taste it. So this is one reason, right? Where many people say that, oh, it's mouth watering now, yummy, 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 right? They can't get enough of it. That is one reason. So because other senses are enjoying the particular food that you see on internet or in a book or wherever, probably orally from somebody, that you want to use your uh, tongue to eat that particular food. Another reason might be some of the, I would say, brain functions. I would say now, now there are some brain areas which are responsible for the memory, pleasure, and reward play, because they all play a role in regard of the food cravings. So, for example, I would say serotonin and leptin, which are some of the hormones. When your serotonin and then leptin are in imbalance, that could also lead to food craving. Now, this is kind of a chemical imbalance, a hormone imbalance of your brain. This is something that a doctor has to assess you, but I would just say it is not. So whenever somebody has a food craving or whenever somebody has craveables, we cannot only look at that issue from the spiritual point of view. There may be some scientific issues as well. I mean, health issues as well. So a doctor has to assess that particular person. Now, finally, it is the emotion. So emotions are the main reasons for many people's food cravings, craveables. So if you look at what food you really need, then you will not overeat or you will not have a strong liking towards food. As people who are following the Buddha's teachings, we should never have a, I would say, strong liking, a craving towards anything, not even the food, because tanha can be attached to any object, be that rupa, saddha, gandha, rasa, pottabha, dhamma, right? It can come in different forms. Now, food only comes in the taste, the tongue, right? But what about the other types of pleasures? It can be a sight, it can be a sound, it can be a smell, it can be a touch, it can be a thought. So we are not supposed to crave for any of these pleasures. We may have to use them in moderation, but we are not supposed to be so much into any of those ones. So food, I would say, emotional eating, I would say food craving is not an exception in that context. Now I wanted to look at self-modification. Now I actually coined a new term called modern self-modification. Now, what is self-modification? Now, did the Prince Siddhartha, I would say, did the ascetic Siddhartha follow any type of self-modification? Yes. We call it, I would say, we call it Atta Kilamatani Yoga, which he himself tried. For how many years? 6 years of his life, especially his time of seeking the truth was dedicated to the enterprising practice of self-modification. I wonder how he was influenced with this practice. Probably I understand that during the time of the Buddha, especially in that time. The Jainism, I would say Jains were very popular. So Jains have this modification, self-modification practice, because they always think the more you, I would say, the more you burn up your energy, the more you torture, the more you give pain to your body, the closer you are to the enlightenment, the faster, the quicker you are to the enlightenment. This is what they believe. Now, looking at what they did was they fasted, they emphasize about the fasting, sleep deprivation, breathless meditation, living naked at all time. These are all connected to self-modification. So Prince, I would say ascetic Siddhartha practice this self-modification, which was motivated by the Jains for 6 years. Only after a lot of things happened to him, and he felt that this is not taking me to any nibbana, any liberation, right? So he understood I have to change my way of looking at it. Now, if you take a look at India, now the normal practices which reflected the Jainism is really very coarse, I would say very extreme. Now they would wear the dirtiest rags, cover themselves in dirt and ash, and sleep on beds of thorns or among corpses. Not even that. They wanted to, how they address the ego was they humiliate themselves in public in an attempt to shatter their ego. Even while meditating, they would breathe as little as possible. Now you can see that it is incredibly a tax on the body. They are taxing on the body. They have a huge cost on the body, right? So Buddha himself tried this, attempted this practice, but then he understood that he was emaciated and he was starving, and even some of the deities, they was also surprised at why he would do so. And sometimes some devas they were mistaken that the Buddha died in search of his enlightenment, and they reported wrongly to the King Suddhodana that your son died, and he didn't believe. But anyways, Prince Siddhartha, or ascetic Siddhartha, tried this self-modification for 6 years. So when it comes to the Jain's practice, it is simply to burn away past karma and stop producing the new karma. This is their understanding to attain Nibbana. Now they are very coarse about it. They are very extreme about it. But the Buddha understood I have to eat a little, eat in moderation, and I also have a certain penance, I have a certain practice whereby I need to be serious about what I'm doing. It may not be a self-modification, but it is a kind of a penance, right? We call it Muni practice, the Muni practice. The Muni means somebody who is trying to, I would say, withdraw oneself from the secular things. So they are kind of trying to withdraw oneself from the secular things. That is being a Muni. Now there is one whole chapter in Dhammapada where it talks about the Muni, the definitions about the Muni. So he said that self-mortification or self-indulgence or overindulgence would not take anybody to the attainment of Nibbana, to the liberation. It is by only practicing the middle path, the Noble Eightfold Path, which has 8 fundamental aspects: Sammaditthi, right view; Samma Sankappa, right intention; Samma Vacha, right speech; Samma Kammanta, right action; Samma Ajiva, right living; Samma Vayama, right effort; Samma Sati, right mindfulness; and Samma Samadhi, right concentration. One can attain the Nibbana. So when we talk about the Noble Eightfold Path, that means it is the middle. Now, if you look at 3 bars, middle path, which we understand by Noble Eightfold Path, is the middle. So it is not too much into self-modification or to indulgence. That means somebody can argue that, okay, that means there is a little amount of self-modification or little amount of indulgence. It is neither. self-mortification, overindulgence. So in order for us to attain Nibbana, we should not practice self-mortification or overindulgence. Now, how are we going to connect this teaching to our conversation today? Now, in Buddhism, when we listen to a lot of Dhamma talks from many monastics or other people, they always talk about an extreme level of preparation for our craving, right? Now, we know in our practical life, we are not practicing Buddhism, uh, the way how it was practiced in the 6 BCE. Now, time has been changing, things have been changing. If we don't accept that fact, that means we don't believe the fundamental teaching of anicca, change. We must believe that we have to practice Buddhism according to where we live, according to the time where we live, and with the resources we live with. Otherwise, we don't understand Buddhism in the best way. Now, if you look at the 70s, 80s, 60s, 50s, 40s, the ways and means how people practice Buddhism from country to country is very different. So that I don't mean that we have to change what the Buddha said. We have to keep what he said, the original essence of the teaching. But the way how we practice it, I mean, with the resources, we have to revisit how best we're going to practice his teaching. Now, this is where we have to look at modern self-modification. Now, when you, I would say, when you keep teaching over and over about the craving for food, so that people are trying to, so that a notion, if a notion is actually risen because food is something we have to discuss, sometimes people are not practicing the eating habits in moderation. Now, I normally call it a modern type of self-modification. So it is not about the food. It is about the amount of the food. Not the nature of the food. You don't need to discuss the food. You don't need to humiliate the food. You should have a balance in eating your food. So this is a big mistake where we can see what many teachers do. This is one example. On the other hand, now monks and nuns, they were supposed to go for Pindapata during the Buddha's time. Now, it is a very good practice. Even monks and nuns are supposed to do. They are trying their best into his world. But at that time, they were traveling. When they eat, they were traveling. So they were burning their, I would say, the essence of their food when they keep traveling. So they didn't get many health issues, right? When they take Pindapata, I would say arms round from a devotee, they are traveling a lot. Now, this is why I'm trying to share with you that we have to look at all these ancient practices in a way how they can be best practiced in the modern times. Now, you do the same thing, but you haven't looked at how the modern world has been changing, so that most of the monastics are getting sick when they're getting older, right? It is because of practicing the ancient important, I would say, teachings. I would say, the Vinaya, I would say most of the teachings, without looking at how best we can practice in the modern time. So what all these irregular ways of practicing ancient teachings could bring is that they're propelling us into, I would say, kind of an environment where most of them getting sick, most of them getting some of the very illnesses, right? So that is why we have to look at these ancient practices different. Now, even when we look at lay people, when you practice some of the teachings from the Buddha, especially when it comes to eating and then craveables, food craving, you have to look at the modern perspective of how best you can practice it. So number one is whether you are emotional when you eat. This is the first thing that you have to look at. Number two is whether you are overeating. So number one is whether you are emotional before you eat. Number two is whether you are overeating, right? And this is what we know in Buddhist teachings, where monks have to kind of reflect on a certain statement where they say, I only take the food just to live, and not for any other cause, not to embellish the body, not for any other cause. In the same way, uh, how it is going to be applied to the lay people is that they have to always look at whether I am emotional towards the food or whether I overeat. These are two very important aspects to see. And then we have to look at food craving, selective food cravings and uh, non-selective food craving. If I have a certain craving towards one type of food, or if I eat whatever the food when I am so hungry, right? So that is another aspect. Third aspect is the perception notions about uh, our perceptions and notions towards the eating habits. I would say eating habits, eating, and all that. One example is that when you discussed food, uh, whenever you talk about food cravings, sometimes people do not eat in balance, as I said earlier. So when you give if you are a monastic, if you are a teacher, if you are a layperson, if you can understand that the most important thing is that it's not non-eating, it is eating in balance, right? Because if you skip your meals by thinking that I only eat once a day, this was an ancient practice. But nowadays we have to look at the social circumstances, healthy circumstances before we eat. Do I have enough interval between my meals? That is one thing. Then do I eat enough food, right? Because lack of eating or overeating, they are two same problems. They are two problems of the same coin, right? This is where I'm telling many people that if you are not concerned about uh, lack of eating, I would say it may be a dieting. People when people eat too much, they suddenly get into a feeling, I want to be on a diet. Then they skip eating for many days and they will get other problems, because we need food, but to a level of moderation. And there are people who don't care about what other uh, advices can teach them, they overeat. So these are two dangerous aspects of self-mortification. Now that could be emotional eating, could be overindulgence, but uh, eating too less can be a modern type of self-mortification. Okay, so that is what I wanted to share with you. But now I want to share with you some of the things that you could do in order to cut down on your unhealthy eating habits or craveables, food cravings, or modern type of self-mortification. Number one is what we can look at is the intention. Now we have to look at whether we are intentional about our eating. If we are really intentional, that means we are really checking with our intention. Then that can help us to sort of uh, have our own self-discipline over food whenever it pops up. Number two is we can substitute the thought of food with the thought of something more important. Now, this is what we learn when we are engaged with something else. I mean, while keeping our three meals very well, then we might not be so much, bogged down by unnecessary cravings toward food, right? Because as we think, so we become. This is the fundamental teaching of Buddhism. Also, you can ask yourself, what do I really want right now? What is the me? What's the feeling behind the urge for food? This is another thing. You have to question you. Do I really want? Because I already had my dinner or lunch or breakfast. You can think that way. So I don't want to actually uh, eat too much between my meals. Also, You can look for a support. I would say it could be a nutritionist or it could be a spiritual person, right? Because mattanyuta, knowing the moderation of eating, it's a teaching, it's a lesson. Now they are not just normal Dhamma talks. I mean, a lot of people they think that Dhamma is just a teaching, but it is an educated teaching. Because if you can do that, you have to learn from somebody, maybe a monk, maybe somebody else, right? So, anyways, this way we have to look at our eating habits, whether they are healthy, they are spiritually healthy as well, and then we have to look at different types of food cravings and how we can actually cut down on them. At the same time, to check us whether we are having different types of self-modification with our thoughts about food. I think we have two questions here. Probably there are some views. Different people eat according to their profession. It is very fundamentally associated with the level of activity they do. The metabolic rate of ingestion and consumption is very connected to lifestyle and the work one does. It's true. But this is why we suggest everybody, we don't actually intervene with what they eat, interfere with what they eat. This is why I was very adamant about, we are not talking about what people eat. We are talking about the moderation part of eating. Whatever the food you eat, you need to keep a moderation. This is the Buddhist teaching. Buddha never intervened with the type of food people eat because it's very different from culture to culture, country to country. It's a different thing. You probably consult a doctor, nutritionist to know, maybe somebody like that to know what food will be good for me. But other than that, Buddhism does not interfere with what food they eat. But there are some teachings for the monks and nuns. And these are the food you can eat, some of the food, right? But the teaching that is common to lay people and monks is that eat in moderation. There are also people who consume so much food but are never putting on weight. On a Buddhist dana, ladies seem to be the cause for many in the Sangha to be overfed and have many illnesses that are associated with poor diet habits. Yes, I mean, this is why I'm telling you. So they take the ancient practice of Pindapata, okay, that's a good thing, but they don't know how to do it in the modern contemporary world. So this is why they're getting out of their control, right? So we have to practice these ancient teachings in the best way how we can do in the modern contemporary context. So we have to, I saw a couple of years back somebody wrote an article about Thailand, about how many monks getting sick because of the poor lifestyles, especially after eating very good food, rich food. Because devotees actually they offer very rich food. Oh, it's a very good thing. But the thing is, we have to encourage the Sangha and then people who are offering to look at how best we can do this without making a group of people sick, right? Because in Buddhism itself, it says eating emotionally, eating too much. And also Buddha mentions in one of the Suttas Anguttara Nikaya, some of the exercise, I would say walking meditation is also a good thing. And then walking kind of thing. So we have to look at all these aspects to talk about food. Otherwise, we may miss out on the important pieces of the conversation. Okay, any more questions? Let's leave out 1 minute. See if somebody has any questions. Okay, we have a question here from Bhante. How we look at eating disorders like anorexia, nervosa, bulimia. Okay, so I have to first understand the technical terms. So anorexia could be characterized by an abnormally low body weight, intense fear of gaining weight, and a distorted perception. So, well, there are different issues that are going with different people, not with everybody. So anorexia is one of the cause. And let me see the other one. It's going to be okay. So the bulimia, if I'm pronounced correct, that was commonly called bulimia. It's a serious, potentially life-threatening eating disorder. People with bulimia may secretly binge eating large amount of food with a loss of control over the eating. Okay, and then purge. Okay, so these seem to me some of the uh, inherent health issues that they are having going through. The kind of teachings we'll be talking actually mainly focus on the healthy people, probably people who can at least manage their eating patterns. So for these people, the first thing I ask them to consult a nutritionist. That's the first thing. But if we really want to look at some of the Buddhist teachings, they need to, because if it is physical thing, then they really need to go through kind of a uh, technical process by a nutritionist. Otherwise, if I say some of the offhand kind of advices, that might not be good for them. But there are things we could do for different perceptions about food. Let's say if we have perceptions about our body weight, there are people who actually, I would say, isolate, who actually sort of insult them because simply because they are actually overweight. There are some of the mental issues going with the body image awareness. Uh, in order to talk about that kind of a thing, we can encourage them to look at the beauty differently, and then to look at some of the ways that you can practice to reduce your body weight. I mean, both health wise and then spiritual wise. But for this question, I encourage for those people who have been going through these kind of technically defined diseases to consult a nutritionist, because that's been very humble to say. Otherwise, my answers might be taken without a doctor's advice. Thank you, though. And then the core issue we face today is the type of food we get in supermarket are not life related, and the shelf life becomes the food that brings diseases and sickness, especially with preservatives. This is the problem of commercial marketing, where food is just to fill up the stomach and the presentation that makes it appealing, but in terms of life value of nutrition, thereby there hardly is any nutriment there. Yeah, I mean, the easiest way is to go get some junk food. I mean, this is the normal thing. People are really lazy. People are lazy to, cook in today's world. So, I mean, that is where they consume a lot of salt and a lot of unnecessary oil. So, in Buddhism, we can give them a piece of suggestion to look at some of the ways to cook, some of the ways to take time to make your own food, so that whenever you cook for yourself, you will know how best to cook, how healthily you need to cook. But if you eat other people's food, you may eat up a lot of junk stuff. You may eat up a lot of saturated trans fat with some sugar, right? So if you are someone who is really driven by the junk food because you are very lazy to cook, probably you can cook for the whole week in the best possible way. You can find other ways to cook for yourself. Thereby you eat very healthy stuff. I mean, talking from a nutrition perspective. But in Buddhism, Buddha always says to take care of us. Before he talks about anatta, not self. A lot of people misunderstand this concept of anatta. They think that we don't care about the body. If you do not take care of your body conventionally, that means you won't be able to develop your mind. Only by developing your mind, you can attain nibbana, even to become a better person. So if you don't, how are you going to develop your mind if your body is weak, if you can't even think, right? So that is where we have to understand that we need to look at this conventional self to be protected in the best possible way. Now, in Bhante's question about those two diseases, uh, I would say these are two identified, uh, I would say, nutritional diseases. So, if you are really caring about yourself, if you really care about you, because if you get sick, you can't practice Dhamma, right? Because you have nutritional problems. So that means if you don't consult a doctor and to get this fix, at least to get a certain follow up, at least to get a certain way to fix this issue over time, that means you are not taking care of your conventional self. So that is a good way of looking at from the Buddhist angle. So if you think that you have some irregular, non-regular kind of sicknesses about food habits, I would say, food related matters, better to concern. You need to be concerned because you need to take care of your conventional self. There's a whole chapter about the self, conventional self in the Dhammapada as well. Okay, I don't think there are any other questions, so it's time to wrap this up. Thank you so much, and I will transfer good karmas to departed relatives and the sharing with the deities and the nagas. May all the good karmas we've been accumulating so far be transferred to all the departed relatives who passed away in the name of all of us. May they be happy and peaceful. If they are in a bad state of life, existence, may they be able to receive all these good karmas and then to exit those bad states of their lives, and then to be reborn in a better place. If they are in a better place, may they be able to attain the supreme bliss of Nibbana. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Idam nyati nang hotu sukhita huntu nyateo. Idam nyati nang hotu sukhita huntu nyateo. Idam nyati nang hotu sukhita huntu nyateo. Also, we have a custom in sharing all the good karmas with the devas and the nagas and other powerful beings. May all the good karmas be shared by all the powerful, influential, magnanimous deities and nagas who protect and bless all of us. May they be well and happy. May they protect and bless all of us for good health, the quality of life, and all the good, prosperous things in the long run. May they be also attain the supreme bliss of Nibbana. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Ittavataj ammihi sambatang punya sampadang sabbe deva anumodantu sabbe bhuta anumodantu sabbe satta anumodantu sabba sampatti siddhya Akasatta Chubummatta Devanaga Mahintika Punyantang Anumoditva Chirang Rakkang Tuluka Sasanang Chirang Rakkang Tudesanang Chirang Rakkang Tumang Paranti. Finally, let's make the greatest wish which we have been always aspiring to be. May all the good karmas we've been accumulating in all these ways by listening to the Dhamma, engaging in the Dhamma discussions, and analyzing, reviewing, recapping. May all these good karmas be helpful for all of us to attain the supreme bliss of Nibbana, not in the future lives, in this very life. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. I'm going to be blessing you with a couple more stanzas. Please receive the blessings. Abhivadana silisse nicchan vaddhapachayino Chattaru dhamma vadhanti ayuvannu sukhang balang Ayurarogya sampatti sagga sampatti mevacha Ato nibbana sampatti iminate saminchatu. I hope you continue to stay safe and take care of yourself with your families. I hope that we will meet again with a couple of interviews in the near future. If not, we will meet again next Monday at the same time with the fourth talk about mental health awareness. Thank you. Have a good night. Have a good day ahead for those of folks who join from Asia.